We are back another week, another pod. Not quite the same turnout as we had last week, but still this is the classic duo, the two co-hosts. I'm joined, of course, by Mr. Aiden. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty solid. In my brackets, not doing that bad actually, but it had a terrible first day. But that's what we're here for. A little more upsets may have been more fun, but at this point, Sweet 16, a lot of good teams playing, so that's also a plus.
Yeah, it was a more of a chalky year. Believe only the fifth time in tournament, at least since they went to 64 teams, that the one and two seeds all made it past the first weekend. Um, so that's it's a thing. Still not as chalk as the women's bracket though. Day one of the round one of the women's bracket had one lower seed win, which is slightly disappointing, I would say. Um, I have actually watched a few of the women's games though, and some of them have been entertaining. The Stanford versus Iowa State was a good game. We went to OT, and then Caitlin Clark had a close game in round two that I was watching. But yeah, the women's brackets are way easier to make, I must say. There's still like seven perfect women's brackets. I think all the men's ones were cooked after round one, maybe the first day of round two. But yeah, got some awesome basketball. It's the best weekend of the year for basketball.
Yo, chill out, bro. Okay, sorry about that. And yeah, no, it was interesting. I think that. Can you hear that?
I could hear the police sirens a few
Yeah,
seconds
that's what I was
ago.
talking about. That's what I was talking about. No, women's bracket, Syracuse, man, we held on against Arizona and beat them. Deasia Fair's a dog. Number three scorer, I think all time. No, number three scorer women's. I think like five all time though. Crazy good scorer. And the UConn game, we almost had him. We almost had him, and then we lost unfortunately because Paige Beckers is a bucket. And yeah, I don't know. Both tournaments have definitely been exciting. Um, it was funny watching um, different styles of play work. So both DJ Burns and Audie Crooks across men's and women's games have played a style of basketball that is somewhat different from the norm. Although in DJ Burns' case, he's a great facilitator. He can pop the mid range, and in the ACC championship against UNC, he hit his first three. So who knows? Maybe that's going to be on his bag too. But I think it's very. We talked about this a little bit before the pod started. The discrepancies between the styles of play in the NBA and college basketball are fun to watch. So, like for me, a guy who I watched a decent amount of college basketball, but is mostly Syracuse related or UVA related and stuff like that. Um, there's significantly less P&R action in college basketball, obviously, because there's just less two men game in general. There's a lot more post game, obviously. Guys like Edey, guys like Burns, guys like Kalkbrenner, who actually in that previous game didn't really have a ton of post work, but these are big men who are more dominant in college basketball than any players you really have at the NBA level in terms of their volume plus efficiency in the post, outside of course, like Kristaps Porzingis. But again, that's attacking mismatches, and I think in college basketball, you see a lot more off-ball screens and running something around the ball handler to try and get to a pass and shoot, a catch and shoot look. Whereas in the NBA, there's a lot more dribbling into looks than necessarily one guy holds it and you run off-ball action. Outside of course, like the split screen stuff that the JJ Redick and LeBron pod was talking about, which is a great listen by the way. But I don't know, it's been cool to watch both and compare and contrast really.
Yeah, the Edey's just like the best example, but yeah, I mean he's the best player in college basketball, but he can't play in the pros really, in my opinion at least. If I think it was Kenny the Jet Smith was saying on like one of the March Madness shows like before their game, he was talking about like in order to beat them, you need to put him in the pick and roll because if you watch like the Utah State game when they do run a pick and roll with Edey, he basically gives up that like 18 to 20 foot mid range every single time to the guard. But the problem is that the like guards on at least on Utah State are not good enough to punish you for that. Whereas in the NBA, like pretty much any point guard is knocking down an 18 to 20 footer, 60-70% of the time if it's open. And Edie's just dropping all the way back. So that is a big difference. But yeah, like I said, I don't know if Edie will be able to play. I saw one NBA guy call him Boban Marjanovic, which might be a little harsh, but yeah, I don't know that he can really be a true impact. Another thing too is that I feel like in the NBA, a ton of the best players are like wings. Obviously, LeBron, like Tatum, KD. In college, I feel like you don't see a ton of those like dominant wings. Like Dalton Connect really this year is like the only true dominant wing that I'm thinking of off the top of my head.
I think Terrence
Um,
Shannon's considered a wing, even though
I
he's a
thought he was a
primary ball
guard.
handler.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess that's one difference. Is like almost if you're a really good like shooting guard, small forward in college, you almost are like the point guard too. Like you take the ball up, they really just want the play like the ball in the best player and the center's hand all the time, which is way different than the NBA. But yeah, it is fun to watch the difference in styles, unless it's UVA style.
I don't know. Hey, some of you who watch the channel may have saw my TikTok. I think there's been slight overreactions on coaching changes and how difficult it is to win March Madness currently, but I digress. We can get into more of the bulk of the episode, which in this case will be trying to make the perfect second chance bracket and right our wrongs from the bracket we made last week, which I think we had Florida the Elite Eight, so it was done pretty early, in all honesty. And again, and this happened with a lot of people this year, or at least my personal bracket. We kind of picked too many upsets. I started to reach for some. I started to fall in love with the Drake certified Loverboy Bulldogs and their abilities to beat Iowa State. And, you know, they did have a steal taken away from them on an inbound because the dude flopped. But, I don't know. I just think in general, there hasn't been a ton of upsets this year. And that's not to say that March Madness has been bad by any stretch. I think it's still been just as good as it is in previous years. And we still had some like wow upsets, like obviously Oakland and Yale. I think even though Yale was, I guess, just a 4-13 matchup, a lot of people had Auburn winning the championship. So Yale coming out and winning that one was pretty surprising in its own right. Um, but yeah, I don't know if I can. Let me share my screen and we can get into this second chance bracket. There we go. All right. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see that. All right, cool. All right. First off, we have UConn, San Diego State. I don't think we're going to take long on this one, but you can let me know if you think San Diego State's got a real shot at it.
Uh, if I were a man who dabbled in certain websites that start with F and end in Andul, I would uh I would certainly be looking at UConn minus 10.5. Um, they going back to last year, they've won 7 straight tournament games by like 10, 15 plus points, like including the championship game against San Diego State. They're just blowing teams out, and I don't think San Diego State is good enough to change that. They have the one kid on them, I forget his name, but he's been having a good tourney. He's averaging like 30 a game. But
Leday, I
UConn's
think.
just too good, and San Diego State can't guard Klingon. Uh, they have the guard too. Is it Newman? Is his last name? Am I thinking right? Tristan. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah, or
But yeah,
Newton, Tristan Newton.
yeah, Newton. Yeah, sorry. But yeah, I mean, UConn's just amazing. They're good. The floor, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's one thing I forgot to mention. If you like to watch basketball, I think UConn's a team you gotta watch. Just in how many plays and sets they run, and how much off-ball movement they have constantly moving. Like it's a little bit prime Spurs ish to me, where the prime Spurs they knew each other so well. You had the passing just so fine tuned in real team basketball. And in this case, I think what the chemistry and passing brought with the Spurs is brought with the sets and the off ball movement of this UConn team. And it's really fun to watch. But anyway, we can move on to the next game between Illinois and Iowa State. I think you know where I'm going with this one based on the fact that I had Iowa State losing to a 15 seed, but I just think Illinois has more offensive firepower, and Iowa State's volatile, foul baity ways may run them into trouble here.
Um, this is the clash of styles. Iowa State's really an all defense team, and Illinois is an all offense team, which makes for an interesting matchup. I also am not a huge fan of Iowa State, and I also have I have my pre made bracket prejudice almost, if that makes sense, where
Yeah,
I picked Illinois in my original bracket, so I want to go with them again, and I think I will. I would also pick Illinois. Really, I think these teams are pretty evenly matched, but Illinois has the best player on the floor easily, Terrence Shannon. They might even have the second best guy on the floor, Domask, as good. Coleman Hawkins is basically Draymond Green, so you never know what's going to happen with him. But I think his style almost he could be the X factor in a game against Iowa State, where he's like the Illinois bruiser. So going against a team that has like that defensive identity, he needs to have a big impact, and I certainly think he can. So give me Illinois.
yeah. I also think Dane Danger could possess a or pose a problem for the Iowa State in terms of size in the interior, and he can also have sort of that bruiser effect to match some of the high-paced run into a guy physical stuff that Iowa State likes to run from time to time on their offense. But we'll go Illinois. You want to flip this or just stick here? What do you think?
Uh, we can. I'm happy with either or whatever. Doesn't
Hmm.
matter.
Well, yeah, we'll move on. We'll move on and come back to it. All right, UNC Bama. Obviously, Bama runs this high-paced, really fast offense, but they also kind of got into a defensive game a little bit. Um, although, if you watch that Grand Canyon Bama game, a lot of it was just pretty much straight pickup. There was not a lot of plays and sets being ran on either side of the ball, so it kind of just turned into who had the better players. And obviously, Bama was going to win that fight, even with Tyon Grant Foster being as good as he was. I like UNC in this matchup. Part of it, like Nick said previously, is previous bracket bias, and I have UNC winning the championship. So I'd be a little disappointed if they went out in this round, in all honesty. I think the X factor for them is Cormac Ryan. I think Cormac has been not great as of lately, and Harrison Ingram has been able to pick it up a little bit. He had a great game against Michigan State, but I'm not sure how much he's going to be able to sustain that other scorer abilities outside of Armando and RJ Davis. So Cormac at some point is going to need to step it up here, and I think he's still very willing. When you watch him, he's one of the only guys I see who's when he's open, he's like screaming for the ball, like hands fully up in the air, jumping up and down for it. So I think he's still willing to and able to shoot, but he hasn't been doing it at a high clip as of late. But regardless, I think UNC can handle Bama here.
Yeah. I think Bama's issue is that their defense is not good, and like UNC is like one of the worst teams to have that against because there's so many guys that can beat you. So it's like even if like RJ and Cormac are having a bad day, like Michigan State, Harrison Ingram played amazing. I think he hit seven. It was either five or seven threes, but yeah. Uh, Armando Baycott, obviously 24 years old, and walking double double. Uh, and Bama really like they have Sears obviously is amazing, and he'll probably get his buckets because UNC's backcourt is not that good at defense. But I think UNC has so many like such a diverse number of players that can beat you, and against that bad defense, it's probably going to result in UNC winning and a pretty high scoring game in my opinion. I mean that's not a hot take in a Bama game, but
Yeah, we'll have him move on. And that's one ACC team down. We didn't touch on that. ACC's been balling as of late, and maybe proven some haters wrong on how hard the conference really is. But next up, we have Clemson versus Arizona. Clemson, obviously, they had a bit of a different game against Baylor, where Shefflin was very good for them. PJ Hall was in foul trouble most of the game, and Gerard hit a couple shots, but um, they just kind of held their own, staved off the last second comeback from Baylor, and now find themselves facing off against an Arizona team that also was in a pretty good game with Dayton for most of the way, and and pulled away at the end. Caleb Love was hot to start, then struggled a bit the rest of the way. Um, and for this game, I just think Arizona with Umar Bayo can match up on the inside against Shefflin and Hall pretty well. I think that has been the main problem for Clemson's first two opponents is they haven't been able to match up with those two and guard Hunter and Gerard at the same time. And I don't think Arizona will have that same problem because they got the bodies at the guard position and the bodies at the center position to match up with them.
The RJ Davis Caleb Love Revenge Tour is meant to happen in Destiny. And also Arizona's just a better team. Yeah, I was gonna say too that Balo can, however you pronounce his last name, he can definitely match up with Clemson well, and they have the best player on the court, Caleb Love. They're just a better team, and Destiny is gonna make it happen.
Yeah, yeah. The only thing I'd worried about for UNC and Arizona is overlooking them, and specifically with like RJ and Armando and Caleb Love, and thinking about the potential of playing against each other in that next round. Anyway, next up we have this is probably one of the more toss up level games in my opinion in Houston Duke. Obviously, McCain dropped 30 the next day. He was in class. He put the student in student athlete, and Duke rolled against JMU. I mean, that was a blowout to the fullest extent. In all honesty, they were killing them wire to wire. They just ran away with that game, and Houston looked like they were going to finish off the game, and then A&M came back and almost knocked them off to knock out the first top two seed, but obviously came up short at the end there. And in a game where Houston in overtime was missing their top two players, I'm pretty sure due to the fouling out at that point. But yeah, I think in this game, I like Duke in all honesty. I think Houston just came off of a scare, so I expect them to be ready to go. But I think the talent on Duke's end in terms of guys like Filipowski and McCain, and I'd look for a pretty good game from Roach here. Obviously, he's a seasoned vet in the tournament at this point. In 22, he was in the Final Four against UNC and lost, so I'm sure he has that hunger in him for this one, and I think that they should be able to get it done. Although I would not be surprised if Shed and Sharp and those guys come to play and maybe show more than I'm expecting.
This is another pre-biased bracket pick from me. I had Duke in my Final Four, but I would stick with it. They're really good. They have like such a well-rounded team. So many guys that can beat you again. I actually have no idea how this game's going to go, to be honest, because like Houston's backcourt is probably the best in the country with Shed and Crier. Uh, and so that matchup against Roach and McCain will be really interesting to see. But then Filipowski is just such a beast. Like I would expect a good game from him in this one. So I would probably go Duke. But this game's going to be. I think this will be the best game of the Sweet 16 probably.
Yeah, I would probably agree to that. Unless, yeah, Creighton, Tennessee might be up there, but I don't know. Anyway, moving on. This NC State Marquette, it's a game that I want to go with NC State. I really want to go with NC State. Um, but I mean, Kolek is very good at basketball and proved that he was healthy enough to put on a show against Colorado. A little turnover prone in that one, but I think he still had 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio there. And the way that they threw their looks at him and he responded probably poses a pretty good sign for this matchup. Although NC State has some pretty good perimeter defenders who may be able to sort of try and block some of that off. So I would not be surprised at all if Horn gets hot or if Burns gets hot and they win. And if you want to go with it, I'm willing to and ready.
Being at NC State, I was just looking at Marquette's lineup in their game against Colorado. Their tallest starter was 6'11", which is taller than DJ Burns. But how many rebounds did he have in the game? 1. That tells me he's soft. If you're soft, you are not guarding big DJ Burns. He's going to eat you alive. In his picture on ESPN, he looks mighty scared. That's because he knows that he's playing Big Burns in the next round. Uh, but in all seriousness, like you do need a very physical center to match up with him. I think, and I don't necessarily think Marquette has that. Uh, this game, in my opinion, is going to come down to the other DJ Horn. He needs to get hot, I think, in order for them to win because Burns is going to do his thing. You know, he's going to finish with like 15, 5, and 5, something like that. Kolek is going to do his thing. Those are probably the two best players in the court. But then it's going to come down to Horn. Can he pop off? Can he have a good day? But I want to keep riding NC State, man. I think they have a good chance in this game. I like it.
Love it, love it, and not to mention, outside of Burns, they still have two starter caliber big men in Diarra and Middlebrooks, who have both had pretty good games in the tournament already. So one of the three of them is going to have a good enough game, I think, for them here. And I didn't ride with the NC State train enough when I should have rode off vibes in the first part. I'm not making that mistake again. I'm not. Okay, now we got Purdue Gonzaga. Gonzaga Kansas was a sad game for me to watch. Kansas was good in the first half. I was very surprised, and then Gonzaga ran them out the gym in the second half to the point that I had to turn off the game. And then Purdue ran Utah State out this tournament, and what the, and I would not be surprised at all if Purdue um, made a pretty deep tournament run from this point on. I honestly probably let my anti-Purdue notions take over a little bit. And this was a matchup in Maui, I believe, in which Purdue won by 10. So I wouldn't be surprised if a similar result happens here.
Your screen is black right now.
Yeah, I know.
But can still hear you and everything all good. But yeah, this game, as I said, to beat Purdue, you need someone that can punish you in the pick and roll. I'm not really sure if Gonzaga has that, and also Edie is just so good. And I'm on the Purdue train. I'm on the true revenge tour, the UVA revenge tour. Uh, I'm gonna ride with Purdue.
All right. That works for me. Sorry, I will try to have my camera back on as soon as I can, but we'll see. Um, Next game we have Creighton and Tennessee. Creighton scared me at the end of the previous game. They were kind of just running around the 3-point line when I felt as if Kalkbrenner had a clear mismatch there. But I don't know. Tennessee also played Texas pretty close. So I think that Shireman is going to have a better game than he had in the previous one. And honestly, I trust Creighton to get it done, although I'd like to see them dish it into Kalkbrenner a little bit more this game than they did in the previous game.
Yeah, I think the difference in this game is that Creighton has like two true stars and Tennessee has one. Um, I said this in the first round. I think that Tennessee they live by the connect and they die by the connect. Um, so I think if Connect's having a good day, they can beat any team in the country, obviously. But like we saw earlier against Kentucky, even when he is having a good day, they can lose. And if he's not having a good day, they got smoked by Mississippi State round one in the SEC tournament. I think Creighton with the duo of Shireman and Kalkbrenner, um, not to mention they have like a pretty good supporting cast around them. Uh, I would go Creighton.
All right, that works for me. Okay, back to the top. We have UConn and Illinois. And sorry, I think I just got to wait the camera out. It doesn't really seem like there's anything I can do to really fix it at the moment. But anyway, UConn, Illinois. You have UConn, a team who uh, I've seen just run as many sets as you can to try and wear down a defense against Illinois, who has a lot of players who have been incredibly offensively gifted in these past couple games. I think it'll be a very interesting matchup. And all the historical stuff tells me Illinois would probably win this game because just it's that hard for a number one overall seed for a repeating champ to make it this far. But I would probably take UConn in this game, although I think it would be very close. So yeah, it's kind of 50-50 for me, but I'd probably go UConn.
I mean, they looked like the best team in the country. Like obviously they got the number one seed. Like looked amazing in 20. I really want to ride with Illinois. I really like them. I did just quickly look at UConn's like two like losses through the year, and it looks like when they lose, it is to elite guard play. So certainly Terrence Shannon and Domas could could have a good day on them. Um, I think putting my rooting for Illinois aside, I would probably have to go UConn because they've just looked fantastic. Um, yeah.
All right, I just realized what I set up here, but we'll see. Okay, this will be the game of the tournament if it happens, in my opinion. All the storylines going into it and everything. UNC, RJ Davis, and Armando Bacot versus former UNC guard Caleb Love in Arizona. I see a couple ways this can go. I see Caleb Love tries to 1v5 his team to get that revenge tour game, and it fails miserably. I see him trying to do that, and it works out. But I think that if UNC can stay within themselves and RJ and Armando cannot try too hard to impose their will on Caleb as the main people in this game, and they play their team brand of basketball that they typically do and play to a typical game script of them, then I think UNC can win this game. I have a hard time believing that at their best, UNC can be beat by anybody in the country. And I would really expect them to come in here with a lot of pride on the line and play their tail off.
Yeah. I would go UNC. I think they're so complete, so good. As I said in the last round, and Arizona, similar to Tennessee in my eyes, they can live and die by the Caleb Love train. They have that one star, um, and especially in this game, all eyes are going to be on him. So yeah, I would ride UNC.
All right. Going back up top, we have this game between Duke and NC State. Most recently, we saw it in the ACC tournament, in which NC State was able to beat Duke. And DJ Burns was really killing Filipowski, in all honesty, in that game, from what I can remember. I mean, it was NC State got a matchup of a lot of non-big led defensive guys, and Filipowski isn't really a big defensively that can match up with Burns. So I wouldn't be surprised to see another game in which Burns takes over the show for them. Although I'd be weary with all the extra motivation for Duke. Obviously, NC State was playing for their lives, and Duke wasn't really playing for much at that point, and now both teams would be playing for their lives. So I think that Duke will probably take this one, but again, if we want to ride the train, we ride the train, and that's also fine with me.
I think this might be where NC State's train ends. Um, Duke is so good. They're it was really funny when we in our bracket last week on the pod we picked a Duke UNC final, and that could still happen. That would be legendary. Uh, that would be hilarious and awesome. And maybe we pick it again. We'll see. But
Perhaps.
I do really like this Duke team, which is something I don't say often because I hate Duke. But they're good. They're good this year.
All right, Duke it is. Taking us into our final matchup, we have Purdue versus Creighton. And for me, I had it previously, so I have a little bias, but I would probably roll Creighton here. Just think that Kalkbrenner can potentially match up with Edie, not to fully stop him because Edie's going to get Edie, but to sort of net out less of an impact than most teams face when they face the wrath of Edie. And then I think Shireman can match up in terms of guard play to potentially pave the way for a Creighton win. In addition to some of the other guys like what's his name, Ashford, I believe, who present a threat from beyond the 3 point line that could be problematic for Purdue.
Um, my second chance bracket's looking a little chalky, but I would still ride Purdue. They were my national championship pick, and I definitely think they would win this game. Creighton looked very suspect against Oregon. The two guys that ate Creighton up were Cousinard and Infali Dante. And if Infali Dante he put up like 20 and 20,
It's
then
true.
what is Zach Edey gonna do? He's gonna eat them alive. Um, it definitely could be a good game. Creighton's obviously super talented. They're a great team, but I would roll with my original pick. So we have a 50-50 here.
I mean, I think we can probably roll Purdue solely for the fact that you have Purdue farther than I have Creighton by 1 game in your previous bracket. So, I had my Natty champion. I'll let you have yours here. We'll have Purdue moving on in this one. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I get Creighton did almost get beat by 2 players in an entire half of basketball plus OT. So it's not like they've been seamless throughout the tournament. And they even struggled with Akron for a little bit before pulling away from that one. So yeah, that's fine with me. We are a little chalky, but again, what I did in my first bracket was I picked too many upsets. So there is potential for it just to be a chalky year. Those happen. So this is the final four we have. Starting off on the left, we have UConn and UNC, and on the right, we have Duke Purdue. So we will start with UConn UNC. Nick, who would you have in this one?
Wow. To be honest, like this game is just like almost impossible to predict. Um, wow. I don't know. I I don't know. I would go UNC. Just
Hmm.
I think the slightest part of me doesn't want or doesn't think or doesn't want to repeat champion, just because it is really hard to do in any sport. And I think UNC. I've said this many times in this podcast. They're the most well-rounded team in the tournament. So I think I would barely sneakily take UNC.
Yeah, I don't know. I think UConn's run has to end, and part of this is simply repeat champions don't happen, number one overall champions don't happen. There's a lot of historical stuff working against UConn. As talented as well coached of a group as they are, I think UNC matches up just fine with them in terms of talent. And UNC has the ability to run a seamless offense in the way that UConn does as well. So honestly, I think if anybody's going to be UConn, it's probably UNC at this point. And yeah, I'd probably ride with UNC in this one. Moving on over, we have Duke versus Purdue. We again have the looming UNC Duke matchup, just like we did previously. People are going to think that we're just UNC Duke fans. But no, I mean, I don't typically root for either team. But anyway, we have Duke, McCain, and Filipowski versus Edie and your national champion, Purdue Boilermakers. Nicholas, who do you have winning in this one?
I mean, my money bracket, I still picked Purdue. I did pick Purdue to win the Natty, but I think this matchup for them, I might go Duke. And really, the only reason I would ever take Duke in this matchup is because if Filipowski's running the five, he can stretch the floor, and Zach Edey cannot guard him. Filipowski would fry Zach Edey, especially if they're stretching the floor like that. Um, and Duke certainly has the ability to stretch the floor. You have Jared McCain, Jeremy Roach is a good shooter too. Um, so I actually I would put the UNC Duke matchup again, like really only because of that Filipowski Edey matchup where Edey cannot guard on the perimeter, and that's my big issue. I think Duke is like the stretch five is something that can beat Purdue and maybe the best in the country.
Yeah, I think that Duke's Duke can run. They have the personnel to run that PNR game, like the play I told you UVA should run their sets off of, where you have ball handler like Roach running PNR with Filipowski. You force Edie to defend that, and it's just not something I really see him doing. And then you surround that with shooters like a Jared McCain, who can potentially work through pin downs off that, and it can just create havoc defensively for Purdue. And then on the offensive end, I think there's potential for some of that burden to maybe affect some of Edie's efficiencies slightly, although he's going to get his obviously, and it paves the way for Duke to win instead of a repeat of our initial bracket, which I'm pretty sure did terribly, and sets up UNC Duke in the final, a game which was played twice this year, with UNC winning both times. And one of those games, Cormac Ryan just absolutely obliterating Duke. And the other game, I believe it was Harrison Ingram who absolutely obliterated Duke. So in both, it was outside of the RJ Armando stuff. And I think that they've already found two different guys to beat Duke and have yet to really find, and I could be wrong on this, a complete RJ Baycott game. And I think that that can potentially carry UNC to the victory over Duke, although Duke will be playing with a ton of pride on the line in terms of losing to your rival three times in a row, in terms of the last time you guys met in the Final Four or later was Krzyzewski's last game in which you lost to UNC to end Krzyzewski's career. And it being the national championship, you're going to lose to UNC in the Final Four in the national championship. That I think is where the motivation aspect of it leans more towards Duke than it does UNC.
Yeah, they always say that it's hard to beat a team like a division rival in the NFL twice, and then you play them in the playoffs, even harder to beat them three times. Um, but in some cases, like last year's Eagles Giants playoff matchup,
All right,
one team is
bro.
just better. No, I'm playing, but like in a serious note, I do think UNC just does have a superior team. That's why they are the one seed and Duke is the four. A one seed wins March Madness, um, a very hefty percentage of the time. I don't know the exact number, but it's usually a one seed. Um, and yeah, they you're right that they beat Duke twice this year without RJ and Armando really taking over, who are their two best players. So I would ride UNC in what would surely be an all-time classic of a game.
Yeah. By the way, update on Paolo Banchero. He has 11-7 with 5 minutes to go. So,
He hasn't done anything in the fourth quarter. This guy every
yeah,
time.
yeah. So it's tragic. For those of you that don't know, we are. It seems not Caruso. Reeves could get us, but he'd have to go on a otherworldly run. It seems like 5 out of 6 of our 6 leg parlay that we may or may not have bet um, is complete. And the one leg is we need one more Palo double double to cash in on a large sum of fake or real cash. Who knows? So we've been watching it closely. But it looks like we will have UNC winning this matchup. How many total points scored, Nick? 153? That's just kind of what I always put. I'm not going to lie.
I literally just I throw like a random number in them. They're between like
Yeah,
140 and 150 usually, to be honest. So yeah.
148. Boom. There we go. Submit bracket. Yeah. And then we'll go up to the top, look at Aiden Hurricanes picks 4, and change it to Sportsphere. And boom, when this is the perfect, chalkiest bracket you've ever seen, but it's right, you know who did it. So there we go. My camera's still not working, man. I tried to fix it. It's really It's really unfortunate. Anyway, I guess that's something we didn't touch on was the some of the betting stuff that's been happening recently. We had Deontay Porter seemingly betting on his unders and then leaving the games with injuries in quotation marks because who knows, and then cashing in. And apparently he has a Twitch stream for like premium subscribers where he gives betting advice or stocks advice or something. So um, it seems we have one of the first cases of how betting has infiltrated the players in the NBA specifically. Obviously, we've seen it in the NFL and we've seen it in the MLB in the past with guys like Pete Rose and the Black Sox, and then now we're seeing it with Shohei Ohtani, which we'll get to. But Nick, what is your opinion on this Jonte Porter situation?
Look, I'm gonna be completely honest. This might be like the man who enjoys sports betting speaking, but I think that there shouldn't be a problem or a punishment for a player betting an over on himself or on his team. Like, if anything, I see no issue with that. Like, really, sports in general is betting on yourself. Like, if you play better, you will earn more money in the league. I don't see an issue really with putting money on yourself or your team to win. But absolutely, in the case of Jonte Porter, he is putting, well, maybe not, but it seems someone is placing large wagers on his unders, and then he's getting pulled from games randomly earlier, and then the unders are cashing. And the weirdest thing to me is that in two games where he got pulled early, the largest winning bets of the night on the entire sports book were on DeJounte Porter unders, and one was in his under 0.5 threes made. And if you think about it, he's like a role bench player. It is such a strange thing for that to be the largest placed bet of the night. So I would 100% think something is off with that, and that he has some involvement with the money making going on there.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel. I think for certain sports it's okay for people to bet on their overs. The only thing I worry about in the NBA is then you have guys just shot chucking if they bet on their overs, trying to play in blowouts late because they bet on their overs. I think it causes more issues in the NBA specifically. I think it's different in a sport like golf, for instance. If Rory McIlroy is going out there and betting on his under and strokes on the day and his under on birdies, or I guess over on birdies are better, I don't really think that affects his game much. He's going to go out there and do the best he can regardless. And then in a sport like, I guess like baseball, it also works for me, I think, because it's a team sport at an individual level. You know, they're individual at bats for the hitters that would be betting on their overs for hitting statistics. And there's no like real way for them to try and inflate that in order to hit it. It's just go out there and they play as good as they think they're going to play. So I think it works more for those sports. I worry about it for basketball specifically. I don't know how it really work for football, and I have no problem with them betting on their teams to win. Team lines, that's fine. Spreads is probably also fine, but again, you don't want a guy in basketball going out there in a blowout, which his coach probably wouldn't let him. But if a coach is doing it, going out in a blowout and playing their star players to ensure they cover the spread, you don't want that sort of thing to happen. Um, Football, I really don't know. Like if a QB takes his over on his passing yards, I guess he's going to go for more deep balls and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess I would say no probably for football as well, but it works for more individualized sports.
Yeah, I completely. That's a good point. I would agree with that. I think basketball is really the one sport where it's like a player's personal success could get in the way of the team success, which could, in theory, result in a player sacrificing his team success for his own stats in order to win gambling money. So I concede that point, and I agree that that would something to be looked at. Um, and another thing I saw was that the like one of the head guys in the NCAA is trying to ban uh
Oh
all
yes.
college player props. Not just like obviously the players aren't allowed to, but he's saying like for and no one should be able to bet on college player props. Um, and that's an interesting point. I think it might be a little bit of an overreaction. But like I don't know. it's a very weird situation that we're getting into with how prominent sports betting is getting. Um, yeah, but yeah, obviously, in the case of Jonte Porter, something's off there. And then if we want to move on to the other big one, Shohei Otani. Um, his agent seems to be stealing money from him. Uh, they had a press conference, but they weren't taking any questions. They just like released a statement. It's a very, very suspicious uh, circumstance. Very suspicious. Um, yeah, I'm not. I have no like. It's hard to speculate what's going on there, but something is off. Like absolutely. Um, I don't know. There's just too many questions left unanswered right now. Like how, like really, how did it happen? Like how do you let your translator like get a hold of your bank account stuff? I don't know. Too many questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't like to speculate that much. And a guy like Shohei has been such a stand-up guy to this point that I am not trying to throw any unnecessary shade his way in the case that he is all clear. Here is what I will say. The MLB set this precedent with Pete Rose where betting on yourself is still illegal and they banned him from baseball. At the same time, the MLB cannot afford for Shohei Otani to be out of the MLB. They can't. The MLB, sadly, as a baseball player growing up, I still watch, but I don't even watch it as much as I watch the NBA or NFL to this point, which, to each his own. But they need Shohei Otani to keep all of this interest they've been buzzing since he entered the league up. So, what I think is the MLB is doing its own investigation. I'd be surprised if that investigation truly gets its due diligence done in terms of, in my mind, the MLB can do whatever it wants and try to hide it. In, if they're smart about it and what they need for their league, and I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, I think they'd stop the investigation short before finding Shohei at all liable for it because then they'd have to do one of two things. They'd have to let Pete Rose back into baseball and then still put some sort of suspension on the Shohei, which, they've done for some of their star players and been just fine, like Fernando Tatis with the whole ringworm PED scenario. Um, so you've seen that happen. But is the MLB really going to let go of the Pete Rose thing they've been stuck on since they did it? Like, I don't really think so. I think it's more likely they say, regardless of what they actually find, that he isn't a part of it at all, sweep it under the rug and keep their star player, the person bringing in the most interest um, in the league. And I know that's a little, I guess, conspiracy theorist of me, which I don't always like to be on the side of, but I just truly doubt that the MLB will kick out its most prominent and best player.
Yeah. Definitely a tough situation for them. I do not know what I would do if I was like the MLB. Um, I feel like you do have to continue the investigation at least to some degree. And I mean, it seems like Shohei and his people are trying very hard. If like he could very well be innocent, but if he's guilty, they are making a very heavy attempt to cover it up. So, um, if you're the MLB and you want to kind of have a blind eye and just take what they say for granted, I mean, it wouldn't. No one would really look at them wrong for that. Uh, but yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And again, everything I've seen from Shohei, I like him. He seems like a very good person. I am not at all trying to say that he is involved with it. I'm just saying I don't know what the MLB would do if he is, considering his impact on the game of baseball at this point. I think it's entirely possible that Ipe really did do this to him. And I think it's also entirely possible it was a scenario where he got sort of duped into doing it and, his friend, the translator Ipe, needed the money and he gave it to him, didn't know what it was for. I think that's also entirely plausible. Um, but yeah, I want to ensure I'm not trying to say Shohei did anything. I'm just saying what I think would happen if he did is not a lot in all honesty. But anyway, we can probably flip this. I don't know how much else we have. It doesn't seem like Paolo's going to get that double double. I think 30 seconds left and he's 8 rebounds. We're getting down to the dog days of the season. It looks like from tonight, the Knicks are going to hold on against the Raptors. Well, I guess it's early, 12 minutes left, but they are up 30 or 30. Yeah, 30. And the Cavs just lost to the Hornets. So now the Knicks are the 3 seed in the East once again. But I feel like honestly we have too much moving parts still to really talk about potential playoff series because at this point the Knicks could still catch the Bucks, the Magic at the 5 could still catch the Bucks, and everything could flip in the East. And then the West, obviously, you still have the Clippers now 6.5 games back of the 1 after suffering a bit of a skid since the All Star break, and the 4, and you have the Suns as the 8, who are just 2.5 games back of them, with the Lakers 2 games back of the Suns. So while we are getting down to the dog days of the season, I still think there's too much left to really touch on any playoff scenarios. What I will say is Nick, your Sixers seem to be in a little bit of trouble. Um, but if Embiid comes back healthy, I'd hate to be the Celtics or the Bucks or even potentially the Knicks or the Cavs who would face that team first round if he would truly be healthy at that point.
Yeah, I actually just got the ESPN notification a few hours ago that Nick Nurse said he expects Joel to return in the regular season. Um,
Hmm.
no. So if he's truly fully healthy and they come back, yeah, I would not want to play him in the first round as the 1 or 2 seed. And it looks like the Sixers are going to be in the play-in. Um, yeah, you said it perfectly. It's too early to tell for any playoff seeding, really. Uh, of course, the Celtics are the 1 seed. That's like guaranteed. But other than that, like everything is up for grabs. The one thing that we can touch on though is the Houston Rockets are on an
Hmm.
absolute heater. Uh, yeah, they are really trying to come on the Warriors, steal that last playoff spot there. Um, they're, I believe, a game and a half back, maybe 2, because the Warriors just won against the Magic. But yeah, should be an interesting playoff race over there. And they've looked good. I mean, I'm a huge Şengün fan. I think everyone likes him a bit. But really, Jalen Green he started off the year not great, but he's been averaging like 27 a game over the last 30 days, I think. Something crazy like that. Uh, Van Fleet's pretty good. Jabari Smith has been putting up a ton of double doubles lately. Um, it's a good team. And Amen Thompson, our guy, number one, top
Yeah.
10 under 10, he has been really good lately, actually. So shout out him. Uh, and we'll see what happens over there. But I have no idea. The teams are too clamped, too mushed together to speculate on playoff series right now.
Yeah. Jalen Green has been good, and they're down 1 to the Thunder at half. Obviously, Şengün's been out, so it's been pretty impressive how Green has stepped up in his absence. And how some of the other guys like a Jock Londale and like Jabari have been playing recently, in addition to our guy, Amen Thompson. And I don't know, it's hard to see him passing the Warriors. Again, this is half of the West is just trusting guys who've been there before. I feel like that's all we have to go off of the Suns, and that's all we really have to go off of the 10 seeded Warriors and the 9 seeded Lakers. It's just like you trust the guys that have been there before, and Kevin Durant and LeBron James and Anthony Davis and Steph Curry. Um, and it's really hard to see a world in which a team like the Warriors gets caught by the Rockets. I would be very surprised simply off what I know of these players, and especially when you consider the Şengün injury. But I think I just saw the injury update. It looks like he could be back sooner than most people expected because I think he was taken out in a wheelchair um, with that injury. But I don't know. I think the Rockets have been playing really good basketball, and I think regardless of the outcome of whether or not they catch the Warriors and whether or not they're able to win those 2 games, make it into the playoffs, I would still consider it a pretty successful season for the Rockets, even though they didn't make a ton of noise. The one thing I will say to that end is I do think the 3 games back minimum or maximum, I think it was, for the play-in may be a good idea to reimpose. I get that we want these 7, 8, 9, 10 games, but like the difference between the 8 and the 9 in the East is 5 games with the Sixers and the Bulls. And the Hawks are 6.5 games back of the 76ers. Like, I just don't really think the Hawks should have the opportunity to make the playoffs when they're just as close to the Brooklyn Nets as the 11 seed as they are to the 8 seed Sixers, which is typically the team that would make the playoffs. So I do think that rule needs to probably be reimposed. So it really represents if a race is that close having a play-in game rather than just letting the top 10 teams into it on each side.
Uh, while I see your point, uh, that would, if you're keeping that standard for the West, like that would kick the Warriors out. And the NBA, like, you make a lot of money off that one, even if it's one Steph Curry game against LeBron. And right now, the Lakers are the 9 seed. They're 2 games back of the 8. So, I mean, you can include that. But,
Yeah, I understand it has consequences, and it's a little bit, more star power driven in the Western Conference to push for more of those games. Obviously, Trey Young has been hurt for a minute, so and the Bulls are a team that I'm sorry, Kenny, I don't think I've watched much of all year. In all honesty, besides a couple games, I watched an OT game they had. I honestly forget some of the games I watched. The game where who was it? The guy had just come up from the G League. You know who I'm talking about? And he played like significant minutes for them in their win. Oh yeah, it was Onurup Batim. That's who it was. It was Batim. I watched that game. That was pretty fun to see him play. But I don't know. I just think you should have to earn the play in spot more so than it is currently. But you're right. The NBA wouldn't really consider that because for all of the bad basketball they let in the East, they let in guys like Steph Curry and LeBron James in the West.
yeah. And honestly, I think, too, like, even as saying this as a Sixers fan, like, as the 8 seed, we would play right now at Miami for our first playing game, and then our second playing game would be at home against Chicago or Atlanta. And so it's like if you can't win one of those 2 games, like, do you really deserve to be in the playoffs? And also, even more than that, it's like in the East, this is more embellished than the West, but it's like in the East, the 8 seed, you have to go play an away series against Boston. Like, and then in the West, you have to go play an away series probably against either Denver or OKC, probably Denver. Um, so it's not like, it's not like they're letting these teams in to have just some like limmicky fun. Like, you got to go and play the best team in the league in an away series. Um, so I personally don't have a problem with it, but I can see how it's like it kind of makes it's by far the easiest sport to make the playoffs if you count playing this playoffs out of any sport. What 2/3 of teams make it, which is kind of absurd if you think about it. But I mean, I enjoy it. I mean, I don't think it makes too big of an impact. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think you summed it up perfectly. Let them have their Lamicki fun. I think that's just got to be the quote on it for the rest of time. But yeah, I think do we? I don't think we have a draft on the docket. We can either wrap up or if you have potentially one you want to roll through. If you want to try college basketball coaches, we can try it, or we can save that for a future video.
Cool to wrap this episode up.
Sounds good to me. It probably works better when my camera's working anyway for a potential draft. I apologize for it. So for whatever reason, breaking down in the middle of that. All right.
Episode on the
Well,
pod made a perfect second chance bracket.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think it's a little bit chalky, but I think it'll work. And then uh, saying that there'll probably be some madness the rest of the way. In all honesty, NC State run to the championship, which I would love. I would love. I would not complain one bit about it. The only thing I'd complain about is the fact that I didn't pick them in one of my brackets to win it, considering how many I made. But anyway, I think that's going to do it for us, guys. I think we're just past the 1 hour mark, so probably pretty good timing anyway. And we will see you guys later.
Peace.